If you've ever dealt with a situation like this, with laying out quilt blocks on the table or on the floor, or maybe this, and by the way, Ronan says hello to all our quilting friends, then you'll understand right away why a vertical design wall can be a total game changer, especially when it stays flat and works for photography too. Hi, I'm Beth Ann, and today I'm sharing an easy solution from my own studio, a DIY design wall that's affordable, pinnable, customizable, completely removable, and works beautifully for quilt layout, display, and photography. Whether you're sharing an in progress photo with friends or need a clean, professional image for quilt show entry forms, this setup holds pieces flat without the very noticeable ridge at the top from a large rod or dowel. And I'll share my secret for hanging finished quilts without sagging in the middle. I've experimented with expensive curtain rods and mounting systems over the years, but what I finally landed on is a budget friendly solution which you might be partially familiar with already. Plus, a simple, affordable molding strip mounting system using wood molding strips from the home improvement store, and simple hooks and cup hooks. These hooks are different colors than the ones that I used, but other than that, they're exactly the same. This method leaves a very minimal footprint on your walls, just two hooks, each less than 2 inches tall, which was essential for me since I'm working in a temporary space. Let's build an easy and useful design wall for you and your studio or sewing space. The design wall that you usually see behind me, often with my Easy Pieces quilt on display, is a full 96 inches by 96 inches, and it's made from two standard 4 foot by 8 foot insulation boards. Now, since I don't have the space to handle pieces that large on camera, we'll go back and forth between details on the big wall and step-by-step demos on a smaller board. My big 8 foot by 8 foot wall generally stays put, but the beauty of the lightweight foam is that if you build a smaller version, such as my 4 foot by 4 foot demo board, it becomes a portable studio tool. You can easily pick it up and chase the light near a window for perfect fabric choices or detailed close-up shots with side lighting to show quilting stitches. We're going to cover basics like boards and coverings first, but stay with me because the real magic for me is the mounting trick that makes it stable without damaging or attaching permanently to your walls. The insulation board I'm using is 1 inch thick and currently costs less than $14 US for a full 4 foot by 8 foot sheet. If you're planning to make smaller design walls, many home improvement stores will cut the board for you for a small fee, which is especially helpful if a full sheet won't fit in your car. These boards are silver on one side, and let me get this flipped around without hitting myself, white on the other, and I always use the white side as my display surface. I also like to reinforce all four sides of the board with duct tape to protect the somewhat fragile edges over time. I cover any visible stickers too, like this one. Options for covering the boards include a repurposed cotton sheet, which may be the most economical option, but cotton may not be enough to help your blocks really cling. Microfiber bed sheets are an option I'm just beginning to explore, mainly because they can be so economical. So far, I'm finding my quilt blocks cling a little bit better on that than on the cotton, but not as well as on some of the other materials. Batting is another common choice, but in my experience, it doesn't always hold up well over time. It can be prone to sagging, collect lint and stray threads, and be harder to keep clean than the other options. But it usually holds the fabric pieces really well, so it's still a viable option. Extra wide felt can work beautifully if it's dense enough, but I found it difficult to source locally now that Joann's has closed. And for some small boards, I've used a very stable polyester fleece that's bright white and easy to clean, but again, the width and shipping can be a little limiting. For my large design wall, like the one behind me, I settled on flannel, and that's still probably my favorite option. Here's a closer look at my large flannel-covered design wall. Easy to use and easy to clean with a lint roller. As you can see, after years of continuous use, the flannel is a little loose, and I'll tell you why in just a sec, and there's a little bit of pilling, but overall, it's held up really well. You'll often see people using spray adhesives to prevent sagging, products like 3M Super 77, Elmer's multipurpose spray adhesive, or 505 temporary adhesive for fabric. The reason the flannel on my big board is a little loose is because I skipped the adhesive entirely when I made it. We were working in a small space and it was too cold to open up the windows. The joys of Michigan in the winter. Let's do a quick run through on a small board so you can see the process. I originally intended to use flannel, but I am all out, so I picked up an inexpensive brushed microfiber sheet to test. It's king-sized, so I can use it for multiple projects. Now please remember, this is a test, not yet a recommendation. I just want to see how it compares. I've sped up this clip, and I'm using 505 spray because it's pretty focused, doesn't bother me like the other sprays, and it's repositionable, which will be very important in a minute. So when I get the fabric on, and here it comes, and there are bubbles or ripples, and there will be, they're easy to fix. Just lift the fabric up and smooth it down again. Now, if you're making a large board, I definitely recommend at least 2 people for this step. It will make it a lot easier than trying to reach everywhere by yourself, especially if you're on the shorter side, like me. And once the covering is smooth, I'm going to add some pins around the outer edges. I'm just about ready to, and here we go. I'm smoothing it down, and I'm just sticking some pins in here to keep the fabric in place when I flip the board. The adhesive will hold it, but I don't want to tempt fate. And there we go. And I think you get the idea. Skipping ahead a little bit, I've turned the board over and started taping. You can see my anchoring pins along the edges of the board. I'm using duct tape again and trying not to cut pieces that are overly long, as it's getting harder to keep it from sticking to itself. When I get to the corner, it's just like wrapping a present. Fold the corner over, smooth everything out nice and neat, then bring the fabric over and tape it down. There we go. It doesn't need to be a perfect miter, just want it neat. Okay? Now I can remove the pins. Alternatively, you could use T-pins if you wanted to leave them in. And here's the test. I don't really like how thin the fabric is, but I've slapped a couple of fabric strips on the board and I'm trying to see if I can shake them loose. So far, so good. Up to this point, nothing is especially revolutionary, right? But this is where things get interesting. I had 2 problems to solve: how to keep the design wall from sliding or bowing without attaching it permanently to the wall, and how to hang a large finished quilt for display or photography. After a lot of experimenting and at least 5 trips to the home improvement store, thank you, John, we landed on a solution that I've been happy with. The key was choosing hooks that didn't stick out past the thickness of the board more than absolutely necessary. Not only are these particular hooks just under 2 inches tall, they only stick out about 1.5 inches from the wall. Then we added a simple molding strip like one of these. The exact profile doesn't matter much. You don't need anything fancy or expensive, although you do want to seal the wood and use sandpaper if you need to on any cut edges. You want it sturdy enough not to bow under the weight of the quilt, wide enough to hold a screw at the top, and tapered so it doesn't leave a thick, visible ridge on the front of the quilt. And a quick side note, these boards have the smaller eyelet screws that I demoed in my quilt display video. I'll link that below too. Compare this to a curtain rod and the difference is clear. Curtain rods work pretty well for small pieces, but they tend to bend from the extra weight when you use them for larger quilts, especially when extended. This hook and molding system solves both problems. It stabilizes the design wall and allows me to easily hang and swap out finished quilts for display or photography. Let me show you how this looks. When I'm auditioning quilt blocks, sashing, or border ideas, I don't usually need pins at all. They cling nicely to the flannel. But because my studio is in an open area in the middle of the house, I'll add some strategic straight pins if I'm leaving blocks up for more than a day. A few well placed pins can also help small pieces hang perfectly flat with nice square corners for photography. Now let's take a closer look on a larger quilt. From the front, you can see a slight ridge where the molding strip is underneath the quilt, but that's mostly because the quilt is lying flat on the table. When I lift it up, you can see that I've created extra slack in the hanging sleeve to accommodate the width of the molding. I give instructions for that in the quilt display video too. When I stand below and look up, the quilt is smooth and flat. The ridge from the molding strip is barely visible. And it's super easy to lift the molding strip up off the hook to remove or change out the quilt. Another note, the Alex units on either side of my design wall overlap it by a few inches. Here's the one on the right, and here's the one on the left. They provide extra support and they can easily be moved if I need more space on the design wall. If you prefer, you could add another set of hooks and molding strip to secure your design wall near the bottom of the wall. I hope these budget friendly, space smart solutions will help you create a design wall that works beautifully in your quilting or sewing space. If this kind of practical studio setup is helpful, you'll find more ideas like it in my Studio Solutions playlist. And if you're a Quilting Friends member, I've also shared a printable checklist with materials as a thank you. Happy quilting!